Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here, and welcome back to the expansive, moderately cold lands of Skyrim. It's been about 8 years since Bethesda first opened up the metaphorical gates to the world of the Elder Scrolls V, and I don't think the community will be closing them very soon. Even today, after all of this time, there are still a few things about Skyrim that leave Dragonborns, shall we say, scratching their heads. Questions the game never answers. Weird phenomenons that are left unexplained. These mysteries can range in scale and scope, from the world-changing disappearance of the dwarves, to the less significant puzzle of why Ysgramor supposedly ate soup with a fork. Regardless of their complication, these curiosities add a huge layer of depth to Skyrim, and indeed the entire Elder Scrolls universe as a whole. They also make for some pretty interesting subject matter. So today, why not dive into a few more of them? Sit back and relax, as we gear up to explore 5 more interesting mysteries in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Starting off, we have the curious case of Domina Magia. Alright, so we're going to need a bit of context going into this one, as this mystery has a lot to do with the lore and history of the Dark Brotherhood. You see, by the time the events of Skyrim begin to kick off, the Dark Brotherhood effectively worships a strange maternal, godlike entity known as the Night Mother, who possesses a mummified corpse that may or may not once have been her own. However, while the existence of a Night Mother has always been a theme in every Elder Scrolls game, in past titles, who exactly she was hasn't always been so clear. In the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, the Night Mother was simply the mysterious figure who led the Dark Brotherhood that we never got an opportunity to meet. It was implied that she was in fact a very much living human being, not a malicious god. But again, frankly, that game didn't tell us a whole lot about the guild's leadership structure, so we're not really sure, and what we do know is quite shady. Then, in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, the Brotherhood was featured yet again, though this time they weren't actually a joinable faction. Despite that, we were still told a lot about them. Morrowind's Dark Brotherhood was led by a very much alive, human, imperial woman named Severa Magia, who was known as the Night Mother, and there was even a side quest to have her assassinated. It wouldn't be until the events of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion that the Night Mother became this gross corpse with magical powers. And to this day, we don't really know for sure how this all happened. Some believe that the Night Mother used to be an official title for the guild's leader, as we saw in Morrowind, until one Night Mother maybe made a deal with Sithis or something, and transcended into godhood. Others argue that Bethesda just decided to retcon the game's lore and break their own narratives. Point is, we don't know. But what does all of this have to do with Skyrim now, you might be asking? Well, in Skyrim's files, there exists a cut Imperial character, named Domina Magia. Yes, bearing the same last name as Morrowind's Night Mother, Severa Magia. In Skyrim, if she spawned in with console commands, Domina enters the game wearing random, leveled vampire attire, looking quite young, though using a default, old, frail voice type. Now, Domina, of course, didn't make it into the final game. However, it seems apparent that Bethesda did have plans for this character at one point or another, and the big question is, what were they? The fact that she is dressed in full vampire garb implies that she certainly wouldn't have been a character seen out in public very often. She likely was to occupy a very dark role in the game. Is it possible that Bethesda intended for Domina to be the real leader of Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood? Maybe make her the Night Mother and have it be a living person once again? When translated from Latin, the word Domina will get you lady or mistress. So maybe Domina is not this woman's name at all, it's simply her title, and we could really call her Lady Magia. Whatever this character's role was intended to be, at the end of the day, as far as canon lore is concerned, it doesn't really make much of a difference. However, it is really fun to consider what Bethesda's original ideas for the game were, and what Skyrim ultimately could have been. Next on our list, The Greybeards are an ancient order of Nords who have dedicated their lives to the mastery and celebration of the Way of the Voice. They serve as, arguably, our strongest allies in our battle to defeat Alduin. By the time Skyrim begins, the organization has 4 elderly members, plus 1 dragon, Paarthurnax, if you want to count him in too. But have you ever stopped to ask, how old are these guys? I mean, clearly they are pretty wrinkly fellows, but there's reason to suspect that the 4 members of the Greybeards may be far older than your average Nord should ever live to be. For one, despite their clearly elderly appearances, when we arrive at High Hrothgar, there doesn't seem to be a single apprentice or new recruit in sight. You would think that, with all of these guys seemingly being in their sunset years, they'd be preparing a strong line of successors. Yet, not a single one is to be found. Either they expect to be kicking for quite some time, or are content with letting their monastery dwindle away. Secondly, and this is what I find to be the most damning, there is an absurd abundance of regenerate health potions all across High Hrothgar. Seriously, it's insane. Wherever there's a dinner table or a nightstand, you can almost guarantee that you'll find a health regeneration potion of some kind resting on it. I personally counted somewhere around like a dozen in the main building alone, which would make the place possibly the most health potion rich location in the entire game. Some, myself included, suspect that the Greybeards might be extending their lives considerably thanks to a clearly frequent consumption of these potions, with a little bit of extra magic thrown in. This would explain their lack of urgency in finding proper successors, how they found the time to so perfect their shouts, and why they seem to be so bloody patient. Admittedly, much of the Greybeards' own history, and how they even go about choosing successors, is a mystery in its own right. Altogether, in the entire lore of the Elder Scrolls universe, we only know of 5 guaranteed members of the Greybeards. The 4 we meet in Skyrim, and their legendary founder, a man named Jurgen Windcaller. So, heck, in theory at least, it's possible that these 4 members might have been some of their original founders too, from thousands of years ago. At the end of the day, with the information we have right now, it's impossible to know how old these fellows are. How grey are the Greybeards? I guess that's for us to decide. Coming in at number 3, what in oblivion is going on with this pile of remains in Falkreath? So, just east of Brittleshin Pass, and north of Lake Ilinalta, players can stumble upon a very difficult-to-explain scene. A large garden of bones stretches over a couple square yards, with large spots of blood in between it all. The skeletal bits seem to be from varying species. There are some mammoth bones, some human bones, and even some appearing to come from deer and elk. Well, there's no flesh attached to anything, really. There is quite a bit of fresh blood at this location, and there's even a ribcage covered in the stuff, suggesting that at least some of what died here met their end fairly recently. But to what and how? At first, I suspected that maybe these animals and people were falling from the nearby mountains to their doom. But that wouldn't explain why everything here's been stripped to the bone. No, some living thing has to be responsible for what's happened. But what beast could have taken down so many mammoths, people, and deer? Well, that's the $1 million, or septum, question, I suppose. One very possible culprit could be werewolves. Falkreath is known to have a bit of a werewolf problem. Hircine's Daedric quest takes place here, and skittish werewolves are even a potential random encounter when in the hold. So they seem to be the most, and possibly the only, reasonable explanation behind this horrific sight that we've witnessed. Even then though, so many mammoths for a single werewolf is a bit impressive. Regardless, I guess you just better remember to watch your back the next time you're out for a stroll in these woods. For 4th spot, we're getting pretty meta, with a mystery that isn't explicitly just related to Skyrim, but in fact pertains to the entire Elder Scrolls franchise. Where is Paion Denia, and just how large is it? So, Pyaindania is a mysterious landmass of unknown size and shape that's said to exist to the southwest of Tamriel, and is constantly referenced in a wide variety of reputable books and other pieces of literature throughout the Elder Scrolls franchise. Chances are, if you're familiar with Akavir, a similar lost continent, apparently east of Tamriel, you're already drawing some major parallels. However, while tales of Akavir are decorated with likely somewhat embellished stories of monkey men, snake people, and ice monsters, what we do know about Pyaindania seems to be much more clear and grounded in reality, as our sources are more consistent, more recent, and better detailed in their descriptions. And we even meet some characters from the region in the Elder Scrolls Online, but more on that later. The third edition of the Pocket Guide to the Empire contains a detailed description of Pyaindania, claiming it to be a mysterious, jungle-overrun land, home to the Mormur, or the Sea Elves, who are known to plunder southwestern Tamriel and the Somerset Isles. The Sea Elves are said to be incredibly sophisticated, and have a history of raising, commanding, and logistically supporting massive fleets and armies, which suggests that their homeland must be quite rich in resources. Allegedly, there hasn't been much recent contact with Pyaindania, nor the Mormur for that matter. The last documented interaction between the people of Tamriel and Pyaindania is said to have been a large naval battle between the two continents in 110 of the Third Era, or around 600 years ago prior to the events of Skyrim. This battle saw a large Sea Elven fleet destroyed at the hands of an alliance consisting of the Empire, the Aldmeri Dominion, and the Psijic Order. Since then, though, information on the bizarre continent and her people runs totally dry. We don't know what's happened. In the Elder Scrolls Online's Somerset Isles expansion, which, mind you, takes place around 1,000 years before Skyrim, and therefore 400 years before that mysterious sea battle, we can engage with a number of Sea Elves, who are in the process of raiding and plundering the Somerset Isles. And they generally take on a very bandit-like, antagonistic role, and players are constantly sent to attack their camps and rescue hostages from their clutches. Sadly, ESO Sea Elves aren't too talkative. They only reveal what we've already known, that they hail from Pyaindania, and don't go into much detail beyond that. So, where is this place? What does it look like? Are the Sea Elves still around? Well, those are the big questions, I suppose. And, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we'll have our answers very soon at all. And finally, last on our list, where the heck is the mind of Pelagius? So, Sheogorath's Daedric quest, the Mind of Madness, will see players teleported to a very bizarre realm, simply referred to as the Mind of Pelagius, after we break into an abandoned wing of Solitude's Blue Palace. But what I want to ask is, where exactly is the Mind of Pelagius? And how is Sheogorath getting us there? You see, Daedra being able to teleport us to their realms in Oblivion isn't anything new at all. It's something we see multiple gods do, including Sanguine, Hermaeus Mora, so on and so forth. But there's reason to suspect that the Mind of Pelagius isn't a realm of Oblivion at all. When we interact with Sheogorath here, he constantly references going back to his plane of Oblivion, the Shivering Isles, which of course implies we're not already there. Furthermore, when we find ourselves in the Mind of Pelagius, we're unable to equip or even access anything in our inventories at all. The only item we're able to engage with is the Wabbajack staff of his that he gives us. This is a reasonably big deal, as normally when we're teleported over to Oblivion, we're teleported with full access to our inventories. Yet, for some reason, Sheogorath's able to decorate us with whatever and only whatever objects he pleases. Now, lucky us, we do have some frame of reference to work with, as in the Elder Scrolls III Oblivion, Sheogorath's Daedric quest was called Through a Glass, Darkly, and it was very similar in its structure. In that quest, we learned of Henantir, an Altmer warlock who acquired an amulet that was supposedly possessed by Sheogorath. After doing so and wearing it for a while, he found himself trapped in his dreams. It would be up to the hero of Kvatch to enter Henantir's dream world and negotiate his extract with Sheogorath. Okay, so it seems reasonable that in Skyrim, we really are in the head of Pelagius, as the quest tells us. The problem here is that Pelagius Septim, the dude whose head we're supposed to be in, he's been dead for hundreds of years. His body has already long been decomposed, and his soul long been claimed by whatever forces that be. So how on Nirn are we supposed to be able to enter his mind exactly? Well, some players suspect that you're not actually in Pelagius's mind at all. Instead, you're in your own. The entire experience is your own dream. Back in the Elder Scrolls 4, in order to enter Henantir's dream world, we had to equip that possessed amulet. However, in Skyrim, only a few seconds after entering the Pelagius wing of the Blue Palace, do we find ourselves just popping up in this odd dimension. Could it be that this is all really, at the end of the day, just a gigantic hallucination by the player, influenced by Sheogorath's own will? Only complicating this matter so much further is that the Mind of Madness quest has a ridiculous amount of cut content attached to it. For instance, there's an unused, unfinished world space in Skyrim's game data, simply titled Old Blue Palace Wing 01. And if you access it with console commands, you'll find a really well-crafted dungeon inside a castle, with all sorts of super strange and wacky assets inside of it. There's even like this really weird, incomplete card matching game that's quite buggy when you try to play it. It's just really neat, but suggests that Bethesda really did have multiple different ideas for how this quest was going to go. My personal suspicion is that Bethesda's original plan for the Mind of Madness quest was to send us to this old unfinished Blue Palace wing and have us hallucinate all of these challenges there. That seems in line with what Sheogorath would do, and does lend some credence to the whole we're already hallucinating theory. But even then, if that is the case, they still must have changed their minds for some reason. So overall, just nothing here makes a whole lot of sense. Where are we? Are we in a dead guy's mind? Are we in Oblivion? Are we in our own heads? These are all potential explanations. And unfortunately, only Sheogorath knows. And all Sheogorath really says is gibberish. And with that, we are going to wrap up our 13th episode of 5 Skyrim Mysteries. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Which of the curious conundrums and puzzling principles that we explored today did you see as the most intriguing? And what Skyrim and Elder Scrolls questions do you have that remain unanswered? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.